Real estate is a team sport. That's something you'll hear a lot of, especially in the multifamily world. And your team is going to include lenders, it's going to include brokers, it may include real estate agents, it may include advisors. But I think one person that doesn't get mentioned much is a person you can just call on for support or a quick encouraging word. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege of speaking with Alex Escobar. He certainly played that role for me. Alex, good afternoon to you, buddy. How you doing?
I'm so happy to be here talking with you, Darian. This has been we've been planning this, I guess, a few weeks now, but
Yeah.
we had a few great conversations, and definitely it stood out to me. So I was really excited to get your invitation. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Thank you. No problem. And I appreciate you carving out a few moments to speak with me here today. We'll just have a conversation, man. Let people eavesdrop on, kind of what a few guys just talk about in the real estate world. So we'll cover some real estate topics, but more importantly, I want to cover and kind of address the real luxuries of life, the things that the financial freedom, that's a buzzword, the things that financial freedom, the journey to financial freedom can provide for you, me, our families, and everybody else. For me, real estate started long before I read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, like most of us do. I bought my first real estate course from a guy by the name of Carlton Sheets. I may
Hey,
be, Carlton Sheets. I bought that. I bought that real estate course he provided, and his thing was no money down. How you could purchase real estate with no money down. That was my introduction to real estate. How did you? How about you? How did you get started in real estate?
so it's funny you mentioned that, and you know what? Actually, I was at my dad's house the other day, and he still has it on the bookshelf.
The Carlton
And I think
Sheets.
I'm gonna steal it. I'm gonna put it on my bookshelf
That's
back there,
funny.
just like antique.
Yeah,
Um, because that was
that's funny.
he bought it for me when I was like 17 years old,
Yeah,
and at that point, I knew I wanted to attain wealth. I wanted to have a certain lifestyle, but at that point, I was gonna make it to the NBA, and that was my path.
okay.
And so I said, okay, I'll worry about that stuff when I'm older. When depending on how things go with this NBA. It's funny because now, like with Instagram and all this stuff, you have access to these coaches, and I watch these Instagram channels with these NBA coaches, and I didn't realize how far away I was from that goal, right? Like there's these coaches on there, and these subtleties of like just like little twists and how you use your body at certain points. I was just further than I ever imagined. I really thought I was just a few steps there, but no,
Sure,
I was never going to make it to the NBA.
understood.
But I believed it at that point. But when I got that Carlton Sheets thing, I watched
Hmm.
it, and I said, okay, this is something I could do, and it did plant the seed in my mind of real
Yeah,
estate being a realistic, attainable path to wealth and to income, even
absolutely.
if and in that creative part of it too, right? Even if you don't have all the money right now, there's ways to do it. And I remember still one of the nuggets I remember him saying was, go take out a loan at the bank and just pay it back. You don't need to blow the money on anything,
That's right. I
and then you're
remember that.
building that relation. And I remember
Yeah,
that still to this day.
yeah,
And I thought it was just clever. I was like, wow, now we're building a relationship, and I'm a good borrower because I paid him back, and that made sense. And I remember
yeah.
that one. That's the only thing I think I'll remember from the of actionable steps from the course. But then just the general attitude, and of course, again, the idea that real estate is a path that I could take. And then fast forward years later, the whole HGTV, flipping houses, all that
Sure,
stuff,
sure.
and and you see it happening. I remember, maybe a few years after that, getting the. I remember going to visit a friend on a plane and sitting next to a loan officer. He
Mm,
gave me his card. He's like, "Hey, you should buy a house." At this point, I was unemployed. I had no money, no
yeah,
credit, no nothing.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you can buy a house. I'll pre-approve. It was before the 2008 crisis. So he was going to
Okay.
give me one of those nice big subprime mortgages. And and I
Right.
remember telling my parents, and they were just like, you can't buy a house. You don't have anything. Um, but it's still like the seed was there, right? I always knew that that was a path. And I guess we can fast forward a little bit later, and here we are. And I'm a partner on 90 units. I've done two syndication deals for
Mm,
multifamily apartments. Um,
congratulations, man.
we've I've actually been a partner on four of them. Two of them I ended up not closing. Right, one of them was because um, just throughout the course of the due diligence period, other things came up, and turns out that the deal wasn't as good as we thought, and we were able to back out before. It's better to find out before you close a
Sure.
deal
Sure.
that, hey, this isn't as good as we thought, than it is after closing and saying, oh, now we're in trouble, right? So we were
Yeah.
able to back out of that one before closing. And then a fourth one, I was invited to be a capital raiser with a good group of guys, and it was such a good deal that they just ended up getting one big check from one big investor, and they didn't need a capital raiser
Mm,
anymore. So after a little bit of due diligence and homework and kind of talking with my network, ended up not being in that one either. Um, but we're on our way right now, kind of establishing, clarifying what my criteria is going to be,
yeah.
and kind of what those next steps are going to be to really start to scale this thing up. But it's been good, and learning a lot, and really, I mean, I'll say that the two deals that we have so far, we've been able to successfully add value to those, and we're lining ourselves up for a pretty good exit, I think, in the next year or two. So I'm happy with those two deals, and I've seen people grow very quickly, and I've seen people take it a little bit slower and steadier. And I just want to like say, like, I'm okay with me going a little bit slower and steadier, because
Sure.
I'm careful, because I'll be the first to admit I've had some sleepless nights of saying,
Yeah.
I have these people trusting me, and their money is with me, and I got to make sure it goes well for them. And
Yeah.
as exciting as it is to say I'm an owner of 90 units, those sleepless nights suck too. So it's not all that pretty at the same
Yeah.
time. There's a little bit of bittersweetness to it.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, and with most things, we see all the glitz and the glamour, but we rarely hear about those moments of the fiduciary responsibility keeping you awake at night. Like just that real sense of I talk to these people, they're trusting me with their futures. And so
Yeah.
now I gotta put up the results. Now you've got 90 units now. Before you jumped into the large multifamily or the commercial space like we're in, did you have after your Carlton Sheets experience, did you have any experience with real estate? Are you a real estate agent?
I am. I'm a real estate agent in the
Okay.
DC area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I have all three licenses.
Okay.
And I started, I want to say it was 2015.
Okay.
So I've been at it like 7, 8 years now. And it was always a side job, right? I had my day job with the federal government, and on the
Okay.
side, I was selling houses. Sometimes I would, I'd make a pretty decent bonus on a year. And
Mm-hmm.
then other years I was, eventually I ended up making more money as a realtor than I did in my day job.
Mm-hmm.
And it all got twisted a little bit once I had a child, right? Then all of a sudden, time becomes much more precious, right? Like the
Absolutely.
idea of spending every evening, every weekend out there showing houses and driving all over town is a little bit more expensive to me now than it was before my little girl was born.
Well
And
said.
so, yeah, and I knew that day would come. I knew that that would happen. I knew that being a realtor is still trading time for money in
Sure.
large part,
Sure.
at least the way I was doing. And I know that there's some realtors who reach a certain level
Yeah.
who have enough of a team underneath them that they can kind of do that. But I was trading time for money. And I knew that my goal was always to become an owner of real estate. And so my first path was to buy my own home. So I bought my first home.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as a real estate agent, I was able to pay off my student loans, which is an example of bad debt, right?
Sure.
In real estate, we always talk about good debt.
Sure.
Well, the student loans, I think, they were hanging over me pretty heavy, and I didn't really get to keep much of my income as an employee
Mm-hmm.
during those days. So those bonuses really helped me pay off that loan quickly. And then I started saving up to buy a second home. And
Mm.
in while I was doing that, it took time. It took years to save up. And that's when I got the education in Bigger Pockets and kind of like all these other
Sure.
podcast formats.
Sure.
And on there, one of the big ones that really hit me was like, okay, you keep your first home and you buy your second. Now you're in a nicer, bigger place maybe, but you keep that first one, and now you're in the game. Now you're a landlord. You're a real estate investor, and that was my first step. And
Okay.
it took years to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I probably wouldn't recommend it just because of how time intensive it is, right? You see people in our kind of work where they just skyrocket, and it's based on other people's money. I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't really fully uncovered that, so I was still working with the limitations of my money, and but I was in it. I had a tenant. I was making pretty good cash flow, and then I
Mm.
started saving up, and it was going to take another few years to get to that third property, right?
Sure.
And while I was doing that, all I could do was just invest in my education. And so that's when I read the Michael Blanc book on apartment multifamily investing. And I said, wow, as a realtor, I'm already doing a lot of these things. I have a
Mm-hmm.
database, I'm keeping in touch with people, I'm seen as a real estate expert already.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just about changing that conversation from do you want to buy or sell a house to
Sure.
do you want to own real estate? Do you want to build wealth? Do you want to attain financial freedom? Here's something that might help you get there. And I started having those conversations with people in my network, and pretty quickly I had maybe six, $700,000 of soft commitments, right? Where people
Mm.
just say, in theory, if I
Wow.
bring you a good deal, if you bring me a good deal, Alex, I'll give you $100,000. I'll give you $200,000. And
Mm.
I said, wow, okay. Now I can go shopping with this theoretical money. I can go and find a good deal, bring it
I
to
like
these
that.
people, and
I
it's
like
it's the
that.
game of the chicken and the egg, right? And
Yes.
and so I had my marching orders. I had some theoretical money I could go out shopping with, and I said, okay, $600,000. Let's extrapolate that to a loan. I can shop for a building up to $2 million, and I
Mm-hmm.
started shopping. And I started negotiating and shopping and analyzing and shopping and negotiating. It took me 2 years and nothing. Like, just the best deal I had come up with that was acceptable to the seller was a break even, make $0 deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't make them work. I don't know
Sure.
if it was just part of that might be the fact that I'm in an area where it's kind of expensive, a little bit more of a um,
Okay.
what would you call it? I'm in a major metropolitan area, so it's
Sure.
just generally expensive. And so to get boots on the ground and actually walk deals that were in maybe more affordable areas, more
Mm-hmm.
like tertiary markets, was just kind of tough with my two jobs and everything that I have here in the DC area. So one of my mentors gave me kind of a big key that was a breakthrough. He just sat me down. He said, Alex, you're doing things right. You're on the right path. You're going to get there, but you're trying to do everything yourself. Going back to your message about this being a team sport.
Yeah.
So he said, keep doing what you're doing, but just add networking with your peers to the mix. Add a little bit more of that networking to it, because I bet you that's where your deals are going to come from.
Mm.
And up until that point, I had been maybe more of the mindset of why do I want to network with people who are competitors, who are doing the same thing as me? I'd rather
Yeah.
network with potential investors or potential sellers or
Yeah.
brokers. That's what do I gain from that? But of course, it turned out he was completely right. And one of those people
Sure.
I networked with, we met for coffee and we kept in touch. And maybe it was like 6 months later, he called me and said, Alex, I got one. Let's partner up. You want to raise the money and we can manage this asset together. And it really was a sweetheart deal. I mean, it's 26 unit apartment building that we bought for less than what my single family house is worth.
Wow.
It was just crazy.
Wow.
And one of the things I think I might still have the stack of in our due diligence, the seller sent us an overnight FedEx with a stack of all the leases.
Mm-hmm.
because he's a paper,
Sure.
overnight. He couldn't email that to me. So that
Sure.
gives you a clue of what kind of management this was.
Sure.
But in it, I saw that the oldest tenant, the longest term tenant in the building had been there since 1989. And in 1989, they were paying $250 a month in rent. And in 2020, that person was paying $250 a month in rent. And
Okay.
the so obviously the play, right, the angle, the strategy there is
Sure.
to increase the rents to what they should be, right, closer to $500.
Yeah.
And it's a smaller city outside in the south, but there was room there to push those rents, and we did, and so now the building might be worth about double what we paid for it, maybe even more. So we'll
Fantastic.
see. Yeah.
Fantastic, man. That I mean that there's so many nuggets of that you dropped in that segment. Now is the you said you bought your primary residence. That was your first purchase. And then
Yes.
you stayed in that for a year. You did the house hack kind of thing, right? And then you
We
moved
stayed there for
out.
6 years. It
Six
took
years,
time.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you rented that one out and then bought your second home.
Hmm.
For just anybody in real estate, how was that first experience of having a property, having a tenant, and then having your primary home? Like, kind of just touch on that just a little bit.
Yeah. I think we got a really good tenant, very, like, a professional person who took good care of the property. And it was just, I think the funny thing, and I've had this, again, as a realtor, I've given advice to people who worked with me, and I said, hey, when the
Mhm.
interest rates were super low, I remember telling people, hey, you might want to consider refinancing because it's
Sure.
good. It's really going to help things out. In, and I remember one of my friends saying, she said, this doesn't make any sense. Like, we do this process, and now the monthly payment is less for the same thing. Why? It doesn't
Yeah.
seem fair. It's just like a financial hocus
Yeah.
pocus kind of thing. And that's how I felt for this rental. I was like, I know what I pay for this house is here,
Yep.
but the market has increased. I've owned it for 6 years, and
Yep.
now the rents are much higher than what I'm paying for it. And this person is still happy to pay this much, and I get to keep this extra difference.
Yeah.
And it just felt like hocus pocus. I was like, this seems
Yeah.
too good to be true.
Yeah.
We had some hiccups, right? We had some of those calls. There was like a big tree, like a big branch was just about to fall on the tree in the middle of the storm. I had to call a guy and go out there and help him like cut the tree down.
Sure.
So there's like adventurous stuff like that, but for the
Sure.
most part, and I was self-managing, right, which is something that in apartments you really want to think twice before doing it. Uh, but I think, one of the books I have here back on the shelf is Who Not How,
Mm-hmm.
which is a book all about delegation, essentially, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to be able to spend as much time as possible in your zone of genius to be able to be as effective in your growth as a business person. I hadn't read that book at that point, so I was managing the property myself. I
Sure.
was um taking those calls. I was changing the air filter myself. I was doing a lot of basic stuff that probably wasn't the best use of my time. But anyways, you learn those lessons and you move on. But overall, like I said, it was a good thing. During those 2 years when we rented the property out before selling it, I mean, I think we increased, probably, not only did we make cash flow on it, but we also increased in value, probably 50 to $100,000 just in those two
Wow.
years of holding it. And then eventually I did sell as part of my preparation to end up leaving my job. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
part of that cushion that allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah,
And
by then
and
I
that
had gotten into the apartments.
yeah, and so that was my question. Did that prepare you, or did that kind of plant the seed for right about the time when your mentor came? Did that plant the seed that, hey, I could do this, I could scale, I could go from maybe not from single families to 50 units, but maybe from single families to duplexes and just a little bit something bigger? Or did you instantly think, you know what, I can do this on a larger scale.
I had heard the term about other people's money, you know, for a long time, but I still didn't really know how to access it.
Hmm.
And I had learned about hard money. I had learned about, but still, every path that I was exploring still involved me saving up a pretty substantial amount of cash
Right,
for, and that's a years long thing. And so that was
right,
really slowing me down. I think that's
right.
one of the things that slows most people down. And I'll say it wasn't really until I read the Michael Blanc book that it clicked.
Mm,
And I think there's something about multifamily that's, the scale is exciting and big enough that you can actually inspire people to
to
invest
get
with
involved.
you,
Sure.
to get involved, and there's enough meat on the bone, whereas single family buy and hold real estate is so slow that it might be a little bit harder, to inspire people to just pull out their checkbook and go with you.
Yeah.
I've actually heard that even within multifamily. I've talked to people who say if you're trying to raise $1 million, it's way harder than it is to go out and raise $10 million.
Yeah.
I personally still don't get that,
Yeah.
but I understand the idea. Like something about something big and ambitious is exciting, and it might inspire people a little bit more to take action, as opposed to something that's just a little bit smaller, right? So,
Yeah.
$1 million to me seems like a lot of money, but to that other guy, it's all relative. That's one of the other big things I've learned in this game is
Sure.
even the term a lot of money, it's very relative. I mean, I've had calls with people who tell me that a $6 million deal is too small for them. They
Yeah.
like everything about it, but come back to me when you got a $15 million deal. I'm like, oh,
Yes.
okay. So
Yeah.
sometimes there's something to it. Thinking bigger is almost easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of along that same vein, like one of my very first properties was a complete gut rehab, right? So, after my Carlton Sheets experience, I was all gung ho. I was ready to go and, making these phone calls and driving for dollars and all this good stuff, but ended up coming across an opportunity where I, one, had access to a line of credit through family members. And so my first asset under management was this house that, I mean, complete gut rehab, everything but the bricks, right? And so in one of my recent blog posts, I wrote that that house taught me everything that book from Carlton Sheets could not, right? And so
Wow.
for me getting into the large multifamily space, like I just threw in that asset under management term. Like I've
Yep.
done these things before, but had no clue that that was what I was doing. Had no clue that I had actually taken on limited partners as investors, and that they were going to trust me with the capital that they gave or the access to the line of credit, and that I would have to produce some results for them. And so prior to me getting my real estate license, I'm licensed in Georgia. Um, I sold that house for sale by owner. Paid everybody back, and I was off and running, man. I was the next Donald Trump or next real estate mogul. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
kind of like you, I was using my own money. And so when you realize that, hey man, like I need to save some money before I can get to this next one. Even if I do the primary residence play of 3.5% down, that means I got to live in it for a year. I got to do this, I got to do that. Or if I go at it as an investor, I can try and raise money again, or I got to save it. So I eventually burned out. I just burned out,
Hmm.
and so I stopped because I was unfamiliar with Burr. I was unfamiliar with syndications, and so career-wise, I ventured off into healthcare. And so then after that, well, during that time, real estate was always, I could always, like what, just always, just right over there. You know what I mean?
Oh, I
Uh,
love it. Yeah.
and so then, kind of like you, Bigger Pockets, Michael Blanc, when these things start getting more popular, and it catches your attention, and it's this one thing you be like, they're doing what? And like for me, like I've stayed in a couple apartment complexes like I could buy that complex I stayed in? Really? So so that's how I got here. So the real estate world, man, I think it's certainly a team sport. It's certainly something that is a vehicle for change. And for me, I think at this space I'm at now, I've acquired so much information and know-how is that I've gotten to the point to where I want to share it with people. Like, hey, this could really be a game changer for you and your family long term. And so that leads me to the true luxuries of life of, financial freedom is a buzzword nowadays. For you, what is financial freedom? How do you define financial freedom?
Well, I've heard, it's funny you mentioned it's a buzzword because I feel the same way, right? Like I just went through the exercise of kind of going and writing down kind of our company mission statement of
Mm-hmm.
what is our purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and and along that lines is helping people to attain financial freedom is specifically our avatar, the people we're trying to reach and work with are people
Mm-hmm.
who are children of immigrants, kind of like I am,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that my co-host on the podcast is, um, because I feel like it's people who come with a certain kind of attitude about, okay, our parents made all these sacrifices, they left all that stuff
Sure.
behind,
Sure.
come back to come to the US to give us a better life. So we have this pressure. A lot of times people like us come and we get our degrees and we get our education and we get that good job, and then we
Mm-hmm.
want something more, but
Mm-hmm.
it's what you're getting to is financial freedom is, what is that?
Yeah.
And in our little mission statement for now we have financial freedom in there, but it bugs me because it's such a jargony, overused
Cliche.
word.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so it's a tough question because, but I mean, as of right now, I couldn't think of a better word for it because that's it, right? It's
Yeah.
it is the freedom to choose what you want to be doing with your life. It's the freedom to be able to
Yeah.
not have to work for money. And that's one of those things that, I have a friend, an investor who is very, I have many friends and investors who are very passionate about their work, to the
Mm-hmm.
point that I call it a calling. And that
Mm-hmm.
those are people who do what they do because that's their purpose. That's what they're here on this earth to do. But then I have many other friends and investors who their work is for money.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference there,
Yeah.
right? When you're working for that paycheck to be able to put food on the table and a shelter for your
Sure.
family, that's meaningful and that's important. And it can even be aligned with your values. It can be good, meaningful work. But if it's for a paycheck and there's something else you'd rather be doing, there's a
Yeah.
little bit of friction there, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, I think it's a pretty rare. It's a rare luxury for someone to have a calling. I think most people are working for money because they have to, because they want to provide for their families,
Yeah.
and there's dignity in that.
Absolutely.
But there's also more dignity in having the freedom to be able to undertake those projects that might not result in any financial returns, right? Like, just as a simple example for me, one of the ones I've always said I was really passionate about because I had a specific incident. I used to have a nonprofit organization in Honduras, which is where my family is originally from.
Okay.
And it was focused on at risk youth and children, in underserved neighborhoods. But then we had one incident where there was a stray dog, and
Hmm.
I just saw this dog, and I don't know what happened, but it had its leg broken, and it was just in the hustle and bustle. I wasn't able to stop and do anything in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a week later, I saw the dog still there with his broken leg just dangling around. And so for me, the thing that I've always thought about is I would love to be able to have like a little area in Honduras, buy some land, and have it be like a little dog retreat
Sure.
A place where these strays could be picked up and kind of given a certain level of quality of life and dignity that even a dog deserves, right?
Sure.
And so I'd love to do that. I'd I'd need, or I would want to have financial freedom to be able to do that, because that wouldn't put any money in my pocket. That would be taking away from my responsibilities with my family to put
Yeah.
food on the table and to provide for them. But I could do that when financial freedom is here. And
Yeah.
so you have freedom to do things like that. Some people have the freedom to to be artistic, right? I have a close friend who's a photographer and very passionate about it. He knows it's not going to provide any income for him in the short term, but
And just
with
loves to
financial
do it.
freedom,
Yeah.
yeah, it can be something like that. It can be something as simple as, I'm going to rest, I'm going to take care of my health, I'm going to invest in myself and my diet and eat right. I'm going to garden and eat natural,
Sure.
good quality food. It could be something as simple as that, as just taking care of yourself or your family or your loved ones, or being the best dad that you could be. So it takes many different forms, and that's one of the things that I think is so beautiful about it, is that it allows us to really, that always, that imaginary question, like, what would you do if you won the lottery, is getting at exactly this, right? Is like, if you
Yeah.
didn't have to work for money, what would you be doing? And it's a fun question to ask. And then it's even more fun when you try to make it a reality, because that is motivating. That's exciting. That is,
Yeah.
we have one life, and we have a few more years to make this happen and to
Yeah.
make it what we want. And so having the end goal of financial freedom is beautiful, and the work of getting there is also beautiful. It's like the journey itself is beautiful. Like, I feel like I mean, our first conversation was hard hitting, right? Like, we were talking
Yeah.
about coming back from the depths, right? Like, getting punched
Yes.
in the gut and feeling that failure, feeling that insecurity, feeling that imposter phenomena, and then you get up, you dust yourself off, and you go again. That is life. That is like
Yes,
empowering.
sir. Yes,
And
sir.
that's the stuff that is like, so even though, like, yes, the end of attaining financial freedom is something that is meaningful to me, but also the development that I'm going to become the person who is worthy of that financial freedom, who has fought for it, who has
Hmm.
gotten punched for it, and I'll be able to. So all of that, the whole thing is beautiful for me. And the two words of financial freedom just don't capture that emotion the way that we would like to. And I think that's what you're getting at with your question, isn't it?
Yeah. It is again well said. And so I think for me that so the refi, the journey of a destination, the journey of a destination is
That's it.
like describes it for me. You know what I mean? Like the financial freedom, everybody has their, I think initially has their dollar amount, that amount that will allow them to work less, to walk away completely from their W 2, to spend more time with the family, with the kids, to travel, to do photography, for whatever it is, you have that dollar amount that if you could replace next month, you would start doing the things you enjoy. But that is the journey of it, right? That's the journey. Like that's the part, and I think people really, really kind of overlook because of the potential of the tangible wealth. You know what I mean? The just it's so it's true. If you buy a building, one building can make you 50, 60, $100,000 a year, and it may be more money than some people have made on their jobs. But once you get that, that's when the journey really starts. You know what I mean? For me, like that's when the journey really starts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's cool, like, through this podcasting medium, you get exposed to people who've done things that are amazing, right? Like, I've had conversations with people who are, have approaching probably billions in net worth, right? Like,
Yeah,
um, and and it's cool. I never would have been exposed to that, right? Most people that I walk around in my neighborhood have net worths probably similar to mine,
sure.
or most people that I'm working with, same thing, right? But when you put yourself in these other rooms where people are kind of doing things that are outside of the ordinary,
Yeah,
then you get exposed to that. And yeah, you see this kind of like this identity crisis that happens, and I think it's very common for people. Like, like again, like one of those people who might have a calling is like, no, I'm a doctor. That's my identity. That's who I am.
Sure.
Um, or people, in other careers too, right? I have friends who are, oh no, I'm international development
Hmm.
professional,
Yeah.
and whatever it may be. But it's kind of also liberating to think you're more than your job. And I know, like in the DC area, we have a kind of running joke that is going to be in the top 3 questions you get when you meet anyone. They're trying to feel you out to see how important you are and how you
Sure.
can help them in their career. It's like,
Sure.
hi, nice to meet you. What's your name?
What do
What do
you
you
do?
do?
Yeah,
Eh,
exactly. Yeah.
Are you important? And so the point is to start to separate yourself from a job, to start to separate your identity from just what you do, can be kind of, I think, what's the word, a little bit unsettling for people, because
It can be.
I mean, we have a joke with my co-host. His name is Aziz, and he's a black person who is of Arab descent, so his look is a little bit
Mm-hmm.
out of the ordinary, I think. And when we were traveling in Japan, a person stopped him and asked him, "What is your identity?" And the guy was like, uh, "I'm I'm I'm originally from Somalia, but I live in the
Mm.
United States. I'm an American citizen." He's like, "Yes, yes, yes, that's your ethnicity. But what is your identity?" He's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm of this clan in the Somali tribe of this," and the guy just kept asking him. Like none of his answers were satisfactory,
Mm.
and we never figured out what he really wanted to know. But I think he was really getting at like what we're talking about. Is like, who are you
Yeah.
outside of your job, outside of your race, outside of your ethnicity, outside of your citizenship? You start taking all that stuff away, and it gets really hard to answer that question. And I think that's what people who've attained financial freedom
Hmm.
might struggle with at the beginning, is who am I after that, after all of this?
Very thought
But it's
provoking.
fun.
Very interesting. Yeah, it is. It is.
It's an important question for all of us to answer.
I agree. And I mean, you just made me think about it. Like, how would I answer that? You know, offline, I'll certainly answer that. Like, who am I? You know what I mean? So, yeah. Before we wrap up, give me some information. Talk about the company. Give me your podcast. How can people connect with you if they choose to do so?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So our podcast is called Screw the Stock Market. You can
I
find
like
us
that.
at screwthestockmarket.com. Yeah, it's a fun one.
Okay.
We take a position, and you kind of know where we stand on things on in terms of that. We
Okay.
definitely think people should be investing in tangible assets like real estate with me, right? Like, or
Absolutely.
with other good operators, right?
Yes,
Um,
sir.
and so, like I said, we have that goal of reaching immigrants and children of immigrants who have achieved a certain level of professional success, and then they want to find this next level of success that
Okay.
we call financial freedom. And so, um, our group is called the Mosaic Capital Group. We just picked that name recently because we see that kind of intercultural, kind of
Mm,
worldwide perspective as like very inclusive, and things like that. And the best place to reach us would be at, we have the tag at Screw the Stock Market Show on
okay.
Instagram and on LinkedIn. And our website again is screwthestockmarket.com. And
That's a
I
great
want to
name.
just invite everyone, because for me, like one of the big things that I had to overcome, which we talk about the journey, right,
Hmm.
is if you, and this is my own personal journey, one of the hardest things for me was analysis paralysis.
Yes.
I talk about this, during those 2 years when I was shopping, I had this vicious cycle where I would analyze a deal. And if the deal was bad, I would say, this is a bad deal. I will not pursue it any further. But then if the deal was good, this is where like the real twisted kind of psychology came in. This is a good deal.
Hmm.
Oh, I must be too optimistic. I must be missing something. There must be
Yeah.
something wrong that I'm not aware of. You start talking yourself out of it, and then I'd go back into my analysis and I'd start messing it up. I'd be like, "Oh, well, what if we don't increase the rents as aggressively, or what if we
Hmm.
whatever it is." I'd just find a way to sabotage the deal until it was a bad deal. And then I'd say, oh yeah, this was a bad deal after all. I'm too smart for that one. So we'll pass on that one too. And I talked myself out of
Wow.
good deals. And so this was my way of paralyzing myself in analysis paralysis.
Hmm.
And so I wrote it kind of for myself, but also in conversations with people in our audience. So in our website, screwthestockmarket.com/OAP,
Mm-hmm.
we have an ebook, a free ebook that people can download, and it's OAP for overcoming analysis paralysis. And so the book is it's all about overcoming analysis paralysis, and it's called Overcoming Analysis Paralysis. And so
Yeah.
people can check it out there. So hopefully that'll be helpful for someone, whether it's as a passive investor, as an active investor. We just hope that people can, because I'm a big believer in the psychology stuff, and like
Sure.
I was aware that this was a way that I was sabotaging my own success. And so if it can help one person to get over that and to take action in their own journey, then I'd be super thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, fantastic, man. Great information. Great concept too. And I agree that mindset is everything. Mindset is everything. I always like to end the show with kind of a like I'll say a couple words, and you just give me the first thing that comes to mind, right? So we did one of the words already. It was financial freedom. I'll just do a couple words. Um, what does family? What does family mean to you?
Oof, center. Kind
Good.
of a rambling answer.
No,
You
that's good.
start. It's a principle in a lot of martial arts is to move from your center, from like your strongest point, and that's family.
That's good. I like that. That's the first time I've heard that one. I like that one. Next word, excellence. What does excellence mean to
Ooh,
you?
excellence is again a mindset of doing things right to the
Mm.
best of your ability, consistently and persistently, and not giving up.
Last word,
Is okay.
sacrifice.
Ooh, delayed gratification.
Well said, my friend.
That's it.
Well said, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Escobar. Be sure you guys follow him. Screw the stock market. Check out the podcast. Connect with him. Connect with him. Alex, I certainly appreciate it, man. Always a pleasure seeing your face, hearing your voice, and talking to you, man. Always a pleasure, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bless you and keep up the good work. You're doing great stuff. Thank you.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks.